Last dessert, you shall be told moral story? A good story? Okay.
A good story.
A good story. There will be a good story, and goodness will be no doubt to you. So, Eadwacer al-Madeena will now tell you a story.
Great, again.
His words of great wisdom.
Great wisdom.
Great wisdom!
Or perhaps great humor.
Or great humor, one of the two.
We'll decide halfway through.
That's right.
So, here, no, and it's
This is the carpenter's doing.
that in
Over there.
the city of Cairo, it is said that there lived a druggist by the name of Abu Qasim, and though he was rich, he lived as a beggar. For he was famed throughout the land for his avarice, for his miserliness. Though he was prosperous in his business, his clothes were like rags and tatters. His turban was so old and so filthy you could not tell if it was white or black. But the greatest testament of all his meanness were his slippers. Armored over like machines of war. The soles mended 1,000 times until they were as thick as the hide of a rhinoceros, studded through with nails. Their uppers had been patched and mended so many times it would take 10 men with good eyesight a solid week to find but one piece of the original. And it had been the chief labor of Cairo's greatest cobbler for the past 20 years to keep them from disintegrating into their component parts, namely dust. And so great was their weight that they had become proverbial throughout the land. If a guest overstayed his welcome, it was said that his manners were as heavy as Abu Qasim's slippers. If a schoolmaster told a particularly bad joke in class, it is said that his wit was as heavy as Abu Qasim's slippers. When Abu Hassan ate that infamous dinner, which sat so heavy in his stomach, they said that it sat in his stomach as heavy as Abu Qasim's slippers. And when I was but new in the empire, they said that I called blows as heavy as Abu Qasim's slippers. I said slow. But on one day, Abu Qasim made a particularly good bargain in the marketplace, and instead of throwing some small feast for his friends and neighbors, as most merchants do when Allah has so blessed them, he decided instead to visit the hammam's baths. A place he has not been, I should note, within memory of man. So he threw the slippers over his shoulders to save them wear and tear, and walked off to the bath. And when he arrived, he left them on the doorstep along with the other footgear and went in. So great was his filth that it took the rubbers the rest of the day to scrub him clean. And it was nightfall when he left, and he looked down, and his slippers were nowhere to be seen. They were gone. Instead, in their place was a pair of citron yellow leather. Oh, so beautiful. Allah must have known I have always wanted a pair like this, said Abu Qasim. But perhaps some person accidentally exchanged the slippers with my own. And so happy at the saving of money, he put on the slippers and went home. Now please know that these slippers were not of Allah. Nor were these slippers accidentally exchanged. Instead, what had happened was the doorman, seeing these fuming objects of slipper sitting on the doorstep, realized that these would frighten away the paying customers, and so hit them around the corner, and at this point the shift ended and went home. Instead, these slippers belonged to the Qadi, the judge of the town, who was in getting himself cleaned. And he was just finishing up, and he sent his servants out to look for his slippers, and they were nowhere to be seen. Instead, all that could be found were Abu Qasim's fabulous footwear around the corner. Well, they of course recognized him at once, and chased after that druggist. And then they found him and brought him back with the stolen wares upon his feet. Well, the Qadi purposely exchanged his slippers with Abu Qasim's, and sent Abu Qasim to the prison, where he promptly had to pay a quite large fine to the officers, so as to be released. Now Abu Qasim was angry. Abu Qasim wanted nothing more to do with these slippers, and so he took his slippers and threw them into the Nile, so that he might never see them again. And this, my friends, would be the end of my story, except through unfortunate circumstances, just 2 days later, few days later, two fishermen were casting their nets in the water, and their hearts grew light as their nets grew heavy, and they pulled, and they tugged, and they strained, and out came Abu Qasim's slippers. The nails having rent the nets into pieces. Now they were furious, and they recognized these monstrosities for what they were. So they went into town and they threw them through the window, and they smashed over vases and vials of sandalwood oil, oils, rosewood, and many valuable things. Now Abu Qasim knew despair beyond normal despair, for he had lost money. And so he decided there was only one thing to do, and he went back into his garden to dig a pit in which to bury his slippers. But, my friends, one of his neighbors saw what he was doing. And this neighbor, he bore a grudge against Abu Qasim, though who can blame him? And so he ran to the Qadi at once and accused Abu Qasim of finding a buried treasure in his garden and not reporting it. Now this matched quite well with what the Qadi knew of Abu Qasim, and so the Abu Qasim was meant to pay up, for he would not believe Abu Qasim's claims that he was only burying his slippers. And so he was made to separate the money. Now Abu Qasim was furious. And so he left Cairo. He left the city and he walked for 3 hours out. And then he cast his slippers into a canal that he might never see them again. And he went home. And this, my friends, would be the end of my story, except the water carried the slippers down to a mill. And there they became tangled in the works, and the mill ground to a screeching halt. The millers ran to see what the problem was and found entangled in the gears 2 monstrosities. Now they recognized them for what they were once. And they went back to Cairo and they demanded of the Qadi that he bring Abu Qasim there and that he be made to pay for his damages. So Abu Qasim was brought to court and he paid for damages and was once again thrown into prison, where once again he had to pay a mighty bribe to be let free. And once again, at the gate as he was set free from prison, he was returned his slippers. Now, Abu Qasim wanted nothing more to do with this. He went home, he placed the slippers on the balcony behind him so he would not see them, and he sat and he thought and tried to think of how to be rid of these slippers for once and for all. And while he was so thinking, just as that cup was knocked off the table, so too did a neighbor's dog jump over and knock the slipper down off the balcony, where it fell onto a grandmother walking below and flattened her as if she'd been made of paper. Her family recognized this weight for what it was and went to the Qadi and demanded either blood money from Abu Qasim or his head. So Abu Qasim was once again forced to pay a mighty fine and an even larger bribe to avoid being sent to prison for a third time, and upon leaving the court, was returned his slippers. But this time, my friends, this time Abu Qasim knew what to do. He strode out, he picked up his slippers over his head, and he stood in the middle of court, and he said, "Let it be known that these are the cause of my pain. These that brought ruination upon me, and due to these, I shall now have to beg for my food." As at this moment forth, Abu Qasim owns no slippers, and any damage that comes to anyone in any way whatsoever from any pair of slippers at any point in the future is not my fault. And he threw them down and stormed out of the court, leaving people falling over and laughing in his wake. And so heavy were his slippers that they became embedded in that courtroom floor to this day. But Allah knows all. Thank you.
Are we ready for fire dancing?
Alright, there we go. Okay. So there you go. Because I told him to give him a break and it